Hi, everyone. Starting prior to the COVID pandemic and then accelerating after that, enrollment in online schools has risen rapidly. An estimated 1.5 million students nationally utilize these educational opportunities. We'll be talking about this trend and one approach from a school in this episode of Teaching Matters.
Welcome to Teaching Matters, a podcast exploring all things teaching and learning. Teaching Matters is produced by NPR affiliate WOUB Public Media in Athens, Ohio. And here is your host, Dr. Scott Titsworth, Dean of the Scripps College of Communication at Ohio University.
Thank you so much, Trinity. Joining me on Teaching Matters today is Alyssa Tormala. She is the head of schools for Laurel Springs School. Laurel Springs was founded in 1991 and is fully accredited private school that is online and serving K-12 students globally. Prior to her current role, Alyssa served as the Director of Teaching and Learning as well as the Dean of Faculty at Laurel. She has also been awarded the Apple Distinguished Educator Award for her work in integrating technology into teaching and learning. Alyssa, it's great to meet you, and thank you so much for being on the program today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So I want to start just by learning a little bit more about you. When I was doing research on you as a person, I see that you have an interesting background that included going to law school. Can you kind of talk about your journey, kind of going through the different pivots in your life and how you ended up in education?
Sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to. It was always something my students would get really excited about, and they'd laugh when they learned what my journey looked like. Anyway, I graduated from college and I thought I want to do something that helps people. So I thought, hey, law seems like a great way to go. So I went to law school. I was a young law student, so I went straight through from college into law school, and I learned very quickly how young I actually was in that space. So many people come to law school after at least a year in industry or oftentimes as a second career. It was probably one of the hardest things I've ever done, but also one of the most rewarding. I learned that I could learn hard things and move forward with that. So I practiced law for about 6 years after completing law school, and I really did love it. I enjoyed the intellectual challenge. I enjoyed working with people. But during that time, I was also a mock trial coach at a local high school. And that really brought forward all of that passion and joy and energy I got from working with young people, especially around, giving them a chance to explore something different and new that they hadn't done before, and that experiential learning opportunity that you get in programs like mock trial. So when, I got to about 6 years in, my daughter was born. I took a little time off for maternity leave, and it gives you that opportunity to reflect. Is this really where I want my life to go? Is this really the area of profession that is giving me the most joy, especially as a parent who is then going to have to be away from my daughter? So at that point was when I kind of changed up, and I went to talk to the teacher at the school I was doing mock trial at and asked him, I don't really know what I'm doing. I don't know if teaching is exactly the right thing for me. Maybe you have connections in the local colleges. I could maybe go teach a few classes. I don't really know what I'm doing with this. And they happened to have a part-time position opened at that high school for an English and history teacher. So I went from a lawyer in June of that year to being a teacher in August. I didn't know what I was doing. I jumped right into the deep end. I eventually went back to school and got my certification and figured out all of the acronyms and lingo and all of that. But I think that was one of the most pivotal moments in my life, is the fact that I didn't know what I didn't know meant that I was really experimenting. I was really stepping into that space of trying things because they looked like they might work, and being a partner with my students in the classroom and making it really truly a cooperative learning experience. And that's what I continued forward with. As iPads came into the picture and one-to-one technology and learning management systems and all of these things started to really come into play, I was the first to jump into them because I saw them as opportunities to open new doors to me as a teacher and to my students as learners. And it just made it a lot more fun as well. So, that's kind of how I came into teaching. And then since then, I was a teacher, I was a department chair, I was an instructional technology coach, I went into school administration, all of this in brick and mortar, and then ultimately ended up in online school with Laurel Springs. And I absolutely love it. So my journey has been an interesting pathway, but it's led me right to where I want to be.
Yeah, the way you narrate your story, it definitely does sound like you were intentional, even though it seemed like it was serendipitous in the way that it worked out for you. So,
yeah, exactly.
how long have you actually been with Laurel Springs?
Oh, this is my third year with Laurel Springs. So I was 17 years in brick and mortar private ed before I moved over to Laurel Springs.
What has that transition been like for you, going from brick and mortar, where you have kids in your classroom or in your building every day, to being fully online?
I thought it would be a lot harder, actually. I was used to being able to pop down the hallway and talk to one of my colleagues, or walk through the hallways and chit chat with the students. And it doesn't happen quite that way in an online environment, of course. So I thought I would feel really isolated and alone. And it's actually quite the opposite. I feel a lot closer to my colleagues. We have a lot more intentionality around the way that we communicate with each other, the way we set up meetings, the way we work together collaboratively. And then because of all of the experiences we create for students, there are actually a lot of opportunities to engage with students. It just looks different, and you do have to get used to it. But at the same time, there's a great sense of connection and joy because there is intentionality in it.
Right. When I was looking into sort of the approach that Laurel Springs takes, one of the things that jumped out to me is that you intentionally use a mastery-based approach. How does that differ from what you might find in a traditional educational environment?
Great question. So, and you can do some of these types of experiences in a traditional classroom as well, and I have as a teacher. But the way our curriculum is designed is that as a student works through an assignment or a practice session or turns in a paper, they have an opportunity to get feedback from their teacher on that assignment or paper or project. And if the teacher says, hey, you did really well in this section, but you could improve in this area, they have the opportunity to then redo the assignment. They can turn in a new draft. They can turn in a new version of their assignment to adjust for that feedback. They don't get docked for it. It doesn't affect their grades if they don't choose to do that. It really is optional, and it gives the students the ownership over their learning. I've had one parent call it mastery of concepts. And I thought that was a really great way to frame it because it isn't, true competency-based learning. It is still a grade. It does still have an ultimate effect on your overall GPA, et cetera. But because students have that ownership of saying, I want to do a little bit better, or I feel like I struggled a little bit, or my teacher gave me feedback, I know I can do that better. They have the chance to retry, and they're not waiting for everybody else in their classroom. Right. They're not holding anybody up. The teacher isn't trying to balance for the other 5 kids in the room that are ready to move faster versus the kids in the room that need to move slower. It's individually paced. So that student really does have the opportunity to own their own individual learning. It's really hard to do that in a classroom environment. And I can say that as a teacher, I've tried in so many ways. And there's so many creative ways that teachers can differentiate in a classroom environment. And I want to call those out as amazing when teachers do that.
Yeah.
But there is this ability in an online asynchronous environment for students to truly be at an individualized, personalized pace.
Yeah. One of the reasons it stood out to me, principles of mastery learning and issues related to that have been around for a long time. And in fact, when I was in my PhD program at Nebraska, our large communication general education course was taught using what was called the personalized system of instruction, which was mastery based and very much sounds like what you're describing. It did follow a typical academic calendar of being a semester long class, but students that really applied themselves could be done with the class around Thanksgiving if they really accelerated their learning. Yeah.
Exactly.
In terms of Laurel Springs, how large is the school? And, I know it's global. And so, what's sort of the geographic reach and then just the raw numbers of how many students you have and faculty?
Absolutely. So we are a rolling enrollment environment, which means our students start their individual academic years on whatever day they start at Laurel Springs. Mm-hmm. Now, about 85% of our students do run on sort of the traditional American academic year, but we have students all over the world who operate at all different kinds of times. So our enrollment fluctuates day to day, but it averages somewhere between 3,000 and 3,500 students per day on average, K through 12, so all 12 grade levels. We operate in every state in the country. We have at least one family in every state. And then we operate in, at this point, over 100 countries in the world. We have students who are there. Now, we have a lot of students in Asia. So a lot of South Korean, Indian students. We're seeing a rise in students coming from the Middle East. We're seeing a rise actually of students coming to us from Africa and South America. So it's been really interesting to see the shifts and changes across the globe as students are saying, I want to have an American-based education, which is what Laurel Springs specializes in, because perhaps I want to go to an American college, or I want to immigrate to the United States at some point later in my life. So having this gives me a stepping stone, but I can do it from home. I don't have to travel. I don't have to worry about immigration issues. I can do it from anywhere as long as I have access to the internet.
You recognizing you've been in Laurel Springs for a small number of, handful of years, but you've been in education longer than that. And as I think back about, when online, especially K-12 schools started to come into play about the same time also as online universities or university online programs, there was sort of, especially for the K-12 programs, there was sort of this mentality that it was serving a very particular need that maybe was, crisis response for students or students that just were not able for various reasons to be in a public brick and mortar school.
Right.
I get the sense that, since COVID, but probably even before that, the reason for students opting into an online school has changed, and that there are a multitude of reasons now. And just the way you describe the demographics of your students would suggest, various reasons why international students are doing that.
Yes.
What do you conclude about some of the reasons, maybe focusing just on domestic students for right now? Why is that number increasing so much, do you think?
Oh, man, I think there are lots of reasons for that. So Laurel Springs has been around since 1991. We were actually the first online school in the country for K through 12, which meant we were plowing the field for a lot of the new things. What is a learning management system? Well, I guess we're going to have to create one. How do we get accredited? No accreditation body knew what online school was at the time. So we had to, really chart that course. So we've seen it all over that time, including COVID, right? We've seen that there's kind of a consistent level of students who do come to online school who are looking for flexibility. That's the number one reason. So you'll often see that in, high-level student athletes who are looking to be college-bound athletes, or performing artists, entrepreneurs, students who have significant passions. They're writing books, they're doing research, they're traveling with their families, things that take up a lot of time and energy on a daily basis that really conflict with the traditional school schedule. That's really been true since the beginning of our experience as a Laurel Springs school. What we're also seeing an increase in now, though, is that I think families, especially after COVID, are a little bit more informed, and they have a little bit more expectation for what their students' individual learning experience should look like. And for many families, they want it to be more tailored to what their students need. So we see, over the last few years, a rise in students who are bullied in school, and they don't want to be in a physical building anymore because of the local area that they're in. We've seen a rise in students coming to us with learning differences, neurodivergence, physical or mental or emotional challenges that they are facing in life that, for whatever reason, make it hard for them to be in a physical classroom. But when they can do learning on their own time, in their own space, their bedroom, their coffee table, wherever it makes sense for them, they thrive. We've seen a rise in students who are traveling. So families who are relocating for jobs, who are moving regularly, whether it's the military or some other kind of profession, and they want that stability for their students. And they're finding that online school can provide a high level of academics while also providing stability and flexibility. So it's been interesting to see that dynamic change. And I think especially after COVID, when, and we're still busting myths, right, about the differences between digital emergency learning, which I was at the forefront of at my previous school, and what truly designed, specifically developed online learning looks like. Those are two very, very separate things. But I think families saw some of their students thrive in that online environment and realized that that was an option. And so we're now starting to see more questions. I've also seen the statistics just increasing dramatically in the United States for homeschool across the board, whether it's online or other types of homeschool experiences. Every state is reporting increases in that. So, families are looking for that personalization. They're looking for the ability to tailor learning to their child rather than their child having to fit into some other kind of environment. They want their student to be successful in whatever way that makes sense for their family. And they're willing to look at more options. And I think, the internet and social media and the availability of information also makes that a lot more readily available to families.
As I looked at your site, and you mentioned giving advanced accelerated opportunities for students that are in unique circumstances. What are some of the metrics in terms of students going on for college degrees, and what you do with your curriculum to prepare them for that sort of accelerated learning through AP courses or similar types of things?
Absolutely. So that's one of the things we really focus on, because again, with those accelerated learners, they're looking sometimes to accelerate grade levels, to accelerate how quickly they can learn a given subject, to have more opportunities for college level learning. So we do have over 25 AP courses that are available, and unlike in a brick and mortar environment, which again I had to navigate with students and families all the time, you're not having to choose between AP biology and AP chemistry that happen to be taught at the same time period, in the same lab. So now you have to choose between them. In our system, you can take as many AP courses as you want at whatever point you wish, and you're always going to have an expert teacher available to work with you. We also have partnerships with 2 different universities for dual enrollment purposes. So students have that opportunity to go through us for dual enrollment, but we will also accept transfer credits or credits from other types of dual enrollment programs that students want to use toward their graduation. So in both of those ways, we're helping students get a leg up on whatever it is that they're trying to do for college, whether it's accelerate in their particular program, get ahead on credits, be able to move to a higher level in certain courses in college, be even more acceptable to certain colleges by showing that they can do the work. So it really gives them a leg up there. We've graduated, at this point, over 7,000 students through Laurel Springs over the past 35 years, and high percentages of them go on to colleges and universities' 4-year programs. A huge percentage will go to selective colleges. So this last year's class of 2025, 32% of the students in that class were accepted to the high-level selective colleges, the Ivy Leagues, the MITs, et cetera. Over 500 colleges and universities over the last 4 years have accepted our students. So the reputation that precedes them because of going to Laurel Springs, those colleges and universities know they will be successful. Right. And what our students report when they go to college and they come back and talk to us is, number one, I was definitely academically prepared. That's no question. But number 2, I had a set of skills that were unique and different from what students in a brick and mortar environment had. I knew how to manage my schedule. I knew how to manage multiple projects. I had to take more ownership over the time that I spent on any given subject on any given day and balance that against the other things in my life. And I had to be proactive. I had to go talk to my professors or my teachers. I had to go talk to my counselor. I had to set appointments. And I did some research just before I came to Laurel Springs on what it meant to be college preparatory. I talked to a lot of college professors at that point. And the number one thing they said was that a key indicator of success for students, especially in their first year of college, was whether they go to office hours, whether they actually approach their professors. Our students already know how to do that. And so they come back and tell us, yeah, it's really interesting because we see a lot of our classmates not doing that. And they seem like that's a weird thing to do. And we're used to doing it. So it feels very comfortable to us. So yeah, I think there are a lot of different layers of what our students are able to report back on as successes, both in college and career. We have a large percentage of our students who move directly into professional careers as well.
And have you observed in the time that you've been in your role, students graduating that are intending to go into college that are the context behind my question is I'm already seeing in my college at Ohio University students that will enter as mid-sophomore status, so they have so many credit hours that they've accumulated through dual enrollment type programs, AP courses that like literally they could graduate in 2.5 years if they want to. Are you seeing that trend as well with your students?
Definitely. Yeah. And we're seeing our parents really push for that, which is one of the reasons why we try to provide as many opportunities as we can. Obviously, we have the accelerated learners. I mean, last year we had, several students graduate at 15 or 16 years old because they are just that academically serious. But we also have parents who are looking at the price tag of college. They're looking at how many years am I going to need to make sure that tuition and food and, living costs are paid for? Can we get a little bit ahead on that? And by doing it in high school, you're getting a double whammy of having that count toward your high school diploma as well, which is great, right? So yes, we've seen a rising interest both from our students and our parents in that area.
As you think about your time in a brick and mortar school, and as I think about the time that I was, which is a while back, but more recently my daughter, of course, one of the things that you get when you're in a brick and mortar school is this sense of community that develops, and
Yes.
there are good points to that, and then there are also, as you mentioned, there can be negatives that are associated with that sense of community. But nonetheless, it's an endemic part of being in a brick and mortar school, whether it's public or private. What do you do in an online environment to provide those opportunities, recognizing that some students may not want that type of interaction, but other students who want the flexibility of being in an online school but still want to have that peer connection? How do you make that available to them in an online school?
Oh, I love that question because it is so important. One of the cornerstones for Laurel Springs education is we believe, and the research shows, that relationship matters in learning, right? That kind of connection that you create with other human beings is important. We don't want kids to just sit in front of a computer and do nothing else. That's not the goal. So we offer lots of opportunities, but the number one thing we talk to families about is that the Laurel Springs experience is really three parts. You have part one, which is the asynchronous independent learning opportunities. That creates all that flexibility for you and your family. Part two is that support, the one-to-one support from teachers and counselors and staff. And we have so many different people who really care for kids and really create that human connection. You do it through individual appointments with your teachers and counselors. They all have calendars available to the students. We have all of our teachers and counselors are involved in clubs and activities, and they're engaged as sponsors. We have in-person events where teachers and counselors and staff come and visit and meet with families. So that one-to-one support from the humans that are part of the community is huge. And then that third piece that you're referring to is the social engagement. And what we talk to families about is, in online learning in particular, you have to lean into that. Mm-hmm. It's not like in a brick and mortar where you just happen to be, oh, you're in the hallway, there's a club going on in the room next to you, you can pop in and say hello. In an online learning environment, you have to lean into something. You have to be willing to have a little bit of courage and try something new. But that means that we as a school have to provide lots of different opportunities to meet the very diverse set of interests and needs of our students. So in our case, what we've done is develop a huge program of clubs and activities. We have over 100 available to our K through 5 and 6 through 12 students, and they're all designed for those different grade levels. Everything from, language clubs to gaming clubs to, more academically oriented clubs like Model United Nations, et cetera. And really anything a student could be interested in, they can also create their own clubs and go through a process with us to do that. And then we have adults available, and that's all virtual. But then on the in-person side, we have field trips every month in a different location around the country that families can choose into if they wish to. We do regional meetups. We do little informal get-togethers when a group of staff happens to be in an area, and we just say, hey, we're going to have an ice cream social here if anybody wants to join us. We have a year-end celebration, which is happening, in fact, in less than 2 weeks in San Diego for us, where we do graduation in person and prom and, all the celebrations for the seniors and field trips and all this kind of fun stuff for families. And what we tell families is, here's the smorgasbord, if you will, of all the ways that your student can engage inside Laurel Springs. Pick at least something. We want you to engage with other people, with your peers, with, in our workshop program with other students in your same class. We also encourage students to engage outside of Laurel Springs, which is one of the reasons we exist, right? So students find their social communities in their training teams or in their stables if they're an equestrian, or in local sports teams, or maybe they're joining a community program. A lot of our students do a lot of community service, and so they will find their communities within that space too. And the goal is that no matter what you're doing, one or the other or both, you find that opportunity to lean into relationship.
That's a fascinating explanation. I assume that, when students become in a relationship, friends, in their online experiences with each other, and then they have the opportunity to meet up, that has to be sort of a magical moment. I mean, do they seamlessly sort of flow into being physically co-located, even though they've only seen each other on screens before that?
They do. And I love that you use the word magical, because that's exactly the word that I've been using the day I walked in the door. going to a Laurel Springs event, whether it's just a little meetup in an area or it's a field trip or one of the bigger events, it really is magical. It's very different than what you might see on a day-to-day basis in a brick and mortar. Sometimes the students have met each other online and they will meet each other in person for the first time, and it's just like peas in a pod and they are best friends. But sometimes they're meeting each other for the first time in these, in-person situations. And it's like all of a sudden these relationships blossom immediately. And it doesn't matter the grade level, because a lot of these events will have kids from kindergarten all the way up through 12th grade all involved at the same time. So you'll have the older students mentoring the younger students and having fun with them, and the families meeting each other. It's just truly a magical kind of experience that comes from that connection. Hey, we're all online, and so let's share that experience with each other, figure out where we are. We have families who will actually travel around the country so the kids can meet up with their best friends who happen to live in other cities. It's pretty.
When, in my college, we embrace the concept of experiential learning, which is typically very community-based, though we define community very broadly. It could be in Athens, it could be, across the world.
For sure.
When students are working through Laurel, I'm sure that you try to integrate that, because you've already said that community and where they're physically located is an important part of their development. How do you encourage that when, if I'm a teacher in a certain class, and I want students to engage in experiential learning that's more community-based, but yet I have students in, 15 different locations? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's very difficult sometimes in an online space, right? And I'm sure you've experienced that as well. Yeah. Harder to do it with a group of students together who all happen to live in different places. So there are a couple of ways we try to tackle that. The first is that just in general, our curriculum often involves opportunities for students to engage in choice types of activities. Pick something in your community that you want to go explore. Research something in your nearby area. And that can be counting toward the experiences that they have as part of their curriculum. So where we can, we build in that student choice to allow for that level of flexibility. Our students who, might be living on a boat, for example, could do an, independent study project where they're really looking at the experience they're having and using that for an academic purpose. So from a curriculum standpoint, we try to create those experiences within the curriculum, but it's really individualized based on what that student specifically is experiencing. However, we do have families who want more of that collaborative learning experience. So we have a program called the Academy, which is a specialized program for grades 6 through 12. It takes everything we do in our main program and adds to it. So one of the key pieces of that program is what we call the workshop program. And that allows students who are all in one type of course, let's say Algebra 1. A group of those students can meet once a week at the same time with a teacher and dive more deeply into that subject. They may all be in different places in their curriculum because they are asynchronous, but the teacher will pull concepts from the course and will create group learning activities, sometimes collaborative opportunities. None of this is graded. It's all an optional experience for students to just have an enhanced collaborative learning experience that connects to what they're doing in their curriculum. Maybe not surprisingly, I shouldn't say surprisingly, our students love the workshop. The ones who are in Academy, they love workshop because they really get that opportunity to dive in. I'll give you an example of one I recently observed that I just loved. Our AP psychology teacher had been going over, personality information and all the research around that. It's in the curriculum. That's part of the AP curriculum. They'd been exploring that as a class. And so she pulled the workshop together and said, okay, so now we're going to use all these frameworks that you've been learning about, and we're going to do this activity as if you are choosing a jury for a trial. And you're going to apply what you've learned about psychology, about, personality development, about how you read body language. You're going to learn all of these or use all of these concepts to work together as teams to decide how would you choose a jury based on these concepts? What would be the connection? And they ate that up. It was so fun. And they had such a great time really in that application of the ideas. While it's not going out into their community and doing it in person, it did give them that chance to collaborate together as a team, no matter where they were. And they were all over the country at that point.
Yeah, very cool. Before I hit record, you and I were talking just very briefly about sort of the faculty hallway conversation issue. And so the other side of that question that I just asked about students and community, of course, your faculty are also distributed across the world. And so in your role as the head of school, what do you do to try to make sure that your faculty are interacting with each other in ways that is, getting accomplished what tends to happen, in the faculty lunchroom and those sorts of things?
Yeah, no, I love that you asked that, because that's something I've really worked on very deliberately over the last 3 years. It's really easy in an online space, in any kind of organization, to get very siloed. You just meet with your team. You just meet with a certain group of people, and that's all you do. And we've really worked hard as a community to build those bridges. We talk about building the bridges between our various teams. So we create very deliberately designed cross-pollinated projects where you've got to have multiple teams working on solving a problem or working on building a new program. And that means intentional, deliberate interaction with each other to help work on this project, similar to what students might do in a classroom, right? Being able to work together on a resulting product that you have to create. We also build in very intentional time for, fun and engagement with each other. So we have monthly, faculty meetings that we do online. We have managers meetings. Each of the departments has their own team meetings that they do on a regular basis. We have collaborations of the various different team leaders across each of the curriculum areas. So we build in these deliberate opportunities for engagement with each other around the business of doing the school. When we can, we also create in-person opportunities. So about 3 years ago, we started a teacher in-service program. Each summer, we bring a bunch of the teachers together in person. We've gotten big enough that it's hard to bring everybody at the same time. So we rotate which teachers come in person, and we do it as a hybrid experience. But that gives people the chance to meet in person. Our teachers and counselors also attend some of those field trips. They do some of the monthly meetups with families. So we have opportunities for them to engage socially as well. I've had a lot of my teachers say that they have better, closer relationships with their colleagues in this online space than they did in their previous brick and mortar environments. And I remember that as a teacher. Yeah. You might be in the same hallway with 5 other English teachers, but you're also busy doing the work of being teachers and working with students. You might never actually talk to any of them. So it's kind of interesting how we can actually be intentionally very deliberate about building relationships and create stronger ones in this space.
Well, I mean, those two words, intentional and deliberate, sort of, I guess that would put I don't think burden's the right word, but if I was one of your faculty members, I would be intentional about reaching out to you and having a conversation or taking part in an optional activity so that I can get to know, my peers a little bit better and that sort of thing. So I think that, just by nature of the medium in which you're interacting both as staff and also with your students, that intentionality sort of brings with it the will and the motivation to do it well. So exactly. That makes sense.
And I think you do have to create a culture also of, we're not going to be perfect in this environment. And really that's true for any school, but I think it can be very hard. And educators, I think, are very hard on themselves about when something goes wrong or something doesn't quite go the way they intended it to, or there's an unfortunate communication with a family or with a colleague. They can really be hard on themselves. So we've also been very deliberate in building a culture of, we don't expect perfection. We expect people to do their best to solve problems where they can. We call it picking up the shoes. So if the shoes happen to be, in your path and they're not your shoes, that's okay. You pick them up and you deal with them. And then you work with each other collaboratively to solve the problem for whoever it is that you need to. And creating that culture allows for people to lean in, because there isn't that sense of anxiety or, is it okay for me to set an appointment with the head of school? Is it okay for me to set an appointment with the director? Yes, yes, and yes. We want you to. We want to create that relationship. And it really does build over time. So I would say that's also a key piece. It's intentionality in the structure of it, but it's also intentionality in the culture that you create.
Last couple of questions about technology related issues. Obviously you are operating in a very technologically dependent, setting. Are there certain types of technology that you would point to and say, this is new and it's pivotal to how students are learning right now?
Yeah, I mean, the obvious answer here is AI, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's the answer that everybody's been struggling with in the education space, particularly in an online space where we're not physically present with the students, and so we don't see what they're doing in their work at every given moment. I think the way we really have to tackle this, and it's not just in the learning, but it's also in how you do business. It's how you collect and analyze data. It's how it affects the way that your marketing program works. Like AI is integrating into all of these spaces and sort of turning the tables.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we've determined is we really have to be flexible. We have to be learners, which is what we should be as educators anyway. We have to make sure we're educating ourselves and our students and our families as best we can, and then try to be flexible and roll with it.
Mm-hmm.
And a key point for us in the learning space is it doesn't work to tell students no on things. What works is to give them other options, right? So as we continue to redesign our curriculum, because we're constantly redesigning curriculum, that's part of being an online school, we're really looking hard at what kinds of assignments are we creating? What kinds of assessments are we creating? Are we giving students an opportunity to make the right choices rather than an opportunity to make the not so great choices? How do we talk to students when they do make the not so great choices so that we're engaging in a learning conversation with them? And we're helping them understand why AI is not a bad thing. It's a tool. But when do you use it appropriately and when do you not? So AI clearly is one of the technology components that's going to affect education going forward. And I think the secondary answer to that is it's affecting all of the systems. Mm-hmm. So when you look at learning management systems, when you look at curriculum development systems, when you look at textbooks online, when you look at the types of materials you can find or use in curriculum development, all of this is getting impacted by AI and the way it affects creativity, the way it affects development. We don't have all the answers. I don't think anybody does because it's moving so fast.
Yeah.
But we're really trying to be deliberate and thoughtful about the way we approach finding the answers in each of those spaces.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. And you're right, it's impacting everything. I'm teaching a class this summer for students that are in our DC-based program, and the class is focused on AI. And one of the things that I'm playing with is, of course, one of the fears that I think a lot of us have is that AI becomes a crutch and it diminishes the motivation and the opportunity to develop critical thinking and creativity skills because it is a crutch. And so what I'm doing with my class this summer is actually, so the first week when we were in person and I was in DC teaching, they debated whether or not AI should be regulated, which this was last week. It was fascinating because as that was happening, of course, the administration was actually considering implementing new regulations and then didn't, which was exactly the debate topic that they were, focused on. For the remainder of the summer, I'm having them develop a personal AI action plan, and I'm pretty loose in terms of what that might mean from one person to another, leaving open the possibility that someone would say, I don't want to use AI, but this is how I'm going to adapt my life to a world that, has it everywhere. Right. But I also want students to have the opportunity to say, okay, I want to be a reporter and I want to have a daily brief on events that are happening that is relevant to the topics I want to do reporting on. So I'm going to create an agent that will do that research and give me that brief every morning. And the process of going through that creation of that agent, I think, is an interesting, creative, and problem-solving opportunity for them. So I think you're right that AI is a tool, and we as educators have been confronted with new tools a lot. Yeah. So it's a matter of figuring out how we use those. Let me ask the last question, which is sort of the opposite of this previous question. So one of the things that I'm starting to see, and I'm sure you are too, is that there's a lot of concerns starting to rise about screen time and, students being sort of glued to their screen, whether it's a small one or this one, that we're looking at right now with our computer monitors, or less so televisions like maybe I grew up with and you would have grown up with, but they're tied to screens. Right. Again, you are a technology intensive setting for learning. What are your thoughts? And I'm sure that, you try to think about ways that students can have balance in what it is that they do. So what are your thoughts on this whole screen time issue?
Yeah, it's a hard one, right? Because I mean, I'm a parent, and my daughter has grown up in a time with screens and phones, and I made some very deliberate decisions with her about when she could have a phone and when she could have social media, et cetera. And I definitely encourage parents across the board to be having those deliberate, thoughtful conversations at home, especially in an online environment. We can't control how much the student has their phone available to them, right? So that's something that we partner with parents on, encouraging them to set those boundaries and have those conversations at home. But I had a colleague recently frame it in a way that I thought was really helpful. Because, of course, as an online school, the fear is that people are going to say, oh, well, students shouldn't be on screens at all. So what does that mean for an online school? And a colleague put it this way. They said there's a difference, and really a clinically available by research difference between what you do on your phone for fun, which might be called screen candy, versus what you do for learning and work and productivity, which might be screen vegetables, right? And so the approach of saying no screens at all means that you're missing out on the stuff that actually is beneficial to you, that is going to be part of any of our kids' futures. They're not going to avoid screens in their jobs or industries, or, unless they go live in a cabin in the woods, chances are they're going to have a screen that they're going to need to interact with. So how do we help them build that skill set of understanding the distinction between what you spend your time on for screen candy versus what you spend your time on for screen vegetables? I think that's one big key component of it that needs to be part of the conversation. I think there's a lot of fear around screens are bad, cut off all screens. I'd like to be a little bit more thoughtful about that as part of the conversation, and really look at what exactly are we engaging with as a student? What is helpful and what is harmful? And how do we help students actually police themselves and think about that from their own personal benefits? What kind of education should we be providing to students that perhaps we haven't done a good enough job with, in the past?
Yeah.
The second component for me is then, as an online school, how do we ensure that the time they're spending online with us, the time they're spending on screen vegetables, is really, beneficial to them, is actively keeping them engaged. They shouldn't just be sitting there and clicking buttons, right? That's not the point. They should be looking at something, reviewing something, learning some content, engaging with something, and then taking that outside of the screen and applying it in some way, shape, or form into their lives. So we try to build a lot of opportunity into our curriculum for students to step away from the screen, whether it's to do physical activity or to go research and write a paper somewhere, to do a science lab in their kitchens. There are lots of ways you can, in fact, balance the screen time with what is actually beneficial to students. So I think for us as an online school, that's the secondary component, is how do we continue to hone what is deliberately, intentionally needed to be on a screen, and what can we encourage students to do outside of the screen that benefits their learning.
I love your balanced explanation of that, and I completely agree. I think that, I also think back to when, the internet started to become a thing, and, we confronted the same things then as we are now about students using the internet for reasons that, are maybe shortcutting, what it is that we want them to do as educators. Went through the same thing. It's much quicker with AI than it was with the internet.
Sure.
But it is some of the same issues. And even back then, I was always very against, syllabi that said you cannot use the internet for this class. I was always more of the opinion, use it well because it's not going to go away, and so develop skills. And I think the screen time issue is very similar to that. I think AI is similar to that. Learn to use it effectively. So I really appreciate your balanced approach. Alyssa, it's been great getting to meet you. Is there anything that you wanted to talk about that I haven't asked you about? We've had a pretty good conversation, so.
Oh, I love the questions you've asked. This is my favorite opportunity in these moments to have conversations with fellow educators. And, it's in these conversations that we make things better for everybody. I guess, a final thought I would leave people with who might be listening to this podcast is there is no one right school for every kid, right? And I think our job as educators and as parents is to really know our students, to take the time. And I tell parents this all the time. If you're thinking about online learning for your student, or homeschooling, or, any other form of education, get to know who your student is as a learner. Think about what is, their best skill set. Are they somebody who is going to learn best in a quiet environment, or do they need the busyness of a classroom? Are they somebody who needs to be around a lot of other students, physically present with them, or are they someone who actually would prefer to be alone? Every kid is different and unique. And that's the whole point of Laurel Springs. Our mission is about the fact that every student is unique. And so what we want is for parents to really know their child, think very carefully and deliberately about what kind of learning environment will be best for them, and then choose accordingly and do their research, right? Because even in online learning, no one school is the same. There are lots of different types of online programs, lots of different types of online modalities. And so we really want parents to be as informed as possible. We want students to be as informed as possible. We always tell them, ask every question you can. We want you to be questioners. We want you to be leaning in and learning everything you can, because that means that when you choose something, you're more likely for your student to be successful. So if it's Laurel Springs, we love it. We welcome them in. We want those conversations. We also understand that we are not going to be the best fit for every student either. So I think that would be my final thought is, learning is a very personal, very unique thing. And none of us come to it in exactly the same way. So where we can help students thrive as individuals, we're more likely to help them succeed as future professionals, adults, people in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And the same thing true with teachers and faculty, that, there's a goodness of fit for them as well. Well, it's been wonderful getting to know you, and thank you for coming on and talking about not just Laurel Springs, but we covered a lot of interesting topics that's relevant for every teacher, every educator, every school. So I appreciate your time.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I've loved it.
Absolutely. My guest today has been Alyssa Tormala. She is the head of schools for Laurel Springs School. If you'd like to learn more about Laurel Springs, we'll have the link to the school's website in the text accompanying the podcast. Thank you for listening to Teaching Matters. We are starting to wind down our season. We still have a few episodes left to go before I take my summer break, but we encourage you to stick around and to keep following the podcast, because, of course, we'll start up our new season in late July, early August, sometime around then. If you'd like to reach out to the podcast, you can email us at teachingmatterspodcast, all lowercase, all one word, at ohio.edu. We would love to hear from you if you have ideas, thoughts, or suggestions. Thanks for listening, and have a great day.